If you haven't already read the Precision Response Training article about Drill Zero, please go to the link down in the description and take a look at that. It gives you a video link showing exactly how Drill Zero works and some explanation on why we think it's important and what it can do for you. After that, then use the other link in the description to go to the article that is effectively explaining what this particular set of variations is about. Among other things, this new article will give you a link to a 5-dot target that's very useful for this set of variations. The old Drill Zero link will give you a link to a PDF report you can use to track your dry fire. Both of those things will help make you a better shooter because they will keep you honest about what you are doing. The problem with Drill Zero, of course, is because it is so simple, there's relatively few things that we can practice during it. Granted, those things are very important. Specifically, we're working on eye focus, grip, and trigger control, our ability to switch our focus from far to near, make sure we're on the front sight, and to work the trigger quickly without disturbing the sight alignment. Obviously, that's fundamental to any type of good shooting. But if that's all you practice, you're missing out on a lot of other things. Hence, the idea for some variations here. In this video, we're going to show 3 different variations on Drill Zero. They are not meant to replace Drill Zero. Matter of fact, if you do these 3 variations, make sure you are actually practicing regular Drill Zero more than these 3 variations, because these things will take away from some of the things you're trying to do in Drill Zero. Now, if you did Drill Zero perfectly, you probably should keep doing those skills correctly during these variations. If you're like the rest of the world, chances are you're going to need to go back and continue practicing. So, these variations, again, should be interspersed with your regular practice of Drill Zero. Variation 1. Before doing any practice for Variation 1, print out the 5-dot target from the article and put it up on the wall that you use normally for Drill Zero. There isn't actually that much difference between regular Drill Zero and Variation 1, but it is kind of an important difference. And the one difference is this. Instead of, in Drill Zero, just picking a point on the wall, getting the gun focused toward it, and focusing on the front sight, in this case, we're going to force you to go to a specific spot, specifically one of those dots. The reason for doing this is pretty simple. After a while of doing Drill Zero, you're going to find that if you don't really think about it, every time you transition to a point on the wall that you're comfortable with. Well, we don't always get to make that choice, and if you only transition to parts you're comfortable with, you might not be used to moving and stopping the gun specifically at any different random point. So, if we use the 5-dot target, it forces us to pick certain points. Nothing else really changes. So if my wall is here, my 5-dot targets are here. I have in my mind which dot I'm going to go to. I use my customary start position. I look at the dot, drive the gun to the dot. As I get there, I take control of the trigger, and I operate the trigger without changing the front sights, but I keep it on the dot. Now, a couple things about that. We don't want you staring at the dot. So one of the things you have to watch out for, and one of the things that Drill Zero is all about, is making sure when you switch over to a near focus here on the front sight, keep it on the front sight. The thing about this drill is it's testing 2 things. One, in Drill Zero, are you actually driving your eyes to the dot and then driving the gun, or are you just kind of switching both at the same time? You'll be able to tell when you do this variation. You should be able to get a solid grasp, a solid focus on that dot, and then the gun will appear there, and then you'll switch your eyes to the front sight. You will be changing that focus. In Drill Zero, sometimes it's kind of hard to tell if you're doing that correctly. The second thing about this one is that it also forces you to, like I said, go to a specific point. You can't move randomly on the wall. You can't pick a spot on the wall that you're comfortable with. You can't just kind of move partially here and just focus on the front sight and ignore the wall. Oh, I turned, it's good enough. You actually have to drive the gun to a specific spot. But we want to make sure, just like in regular Drill Zero, that you're not staring at the wall or the dot. So make sure when you're doing this, pay attention to eye focus. We're looking off in the distance. We snap our head to the dot, we drive the gun to it as we take up the slack, and then we focus our eyes on that front sight. And when we have a solid focus on the front sight, then we work the trigger. And again, remember, the idea is to not work the trigger slowly in a bullseye fashion. The point is to work the trigger and get it better and better so you can more quickly pull the trigger without disturbing the sight alignment. Now, personally, when I do this, I prefer to use a different dot each time for each rep. Since we're doing 10 reps freestyle, strong hand, and weak hand, I go through each set of 5 dots twice for each different version. Make sure you're focusing on the front sight. Periodically, ignore the dots completely, pick a blank section of wall, go back to regular drill 0 to make certain that you are still focusing only on the front sight. Variation 2. Variation 2 is just a little more complicated. The first part of variation 2 is almost exactly like variation 1. Okay, we still have our 5-dot target up on the wall here. Again, we start off in the distance. Again, we want to focus our eyes as far in the distance as we can anytime we're doing any variation of drill 0, which includes the original form of drill 0. We want to practice that eye movement, the focusing from distance to close. So we've got our 5-dot target. For variation 2, again, we start there. We snap our head to the target, we drive the gun, and we take up the slack. And here's the different part. We're not pulling the trigger on that first dot. We're going to shift our focus there. We're going to prep the trigger so it's almost ready to go. We're going to make sure we are solidly locked on it. And then we're going to snap our head and the gun to the next dot, or at least another dot. And once we're on it solidly, then we're going to work the trigger. That makes it fairly different. We're going to get 2 sight pictures. We're going to prep twice, but we're only going to pull the trigger once. Now, obviously, if you have a double action gun, you can pull the trigger both times, but it really isn't necessary. We're still working the changing eye focus. We're still working snapping the head and driving the gun. We're still working on focusing on that front sight and getting a good prep twice. But only on the second dot are we finishing the shot. This does a couple things for us. 1, it practices eye focus for short distances. And 2, it also works on our ability to trust ourselves when those sights are on the second dot locked in so that we can immediately work the trigger. Short transitions like that, there shouldn't be a whole lot of pause. It shouldn't take you nearly as long to do that transition and work the trigger as it did for longer transitions. But people often don't trust themselves, and so they take as long doing that as they do any other long transition. With variation 2, you can get over that. Now, when I do this, again, I try to make it fairly difficult for myself. So I don't just pick the dots that are next to each other when I practice transitions. I go from up to down, top to bottom, cross, that sort of thing. If you really want to get exotic, you can actually jump 2. As in, you come to 1 dot, transition to a second dot, prep, transition to a third dot, prep, and finish the shot. It's up to you how many you want to do. I strongly advise simply starting with 2 dots, adding 1 extra transition. But work on getting that second transition quickly and immediately get that trigger work done, because with a short transition like that, and the gun is basically staying in alignment the entire time through a very short movement, you should be able to work that trigger quickly, still without disturbing the sight alignment. Effectively, variation 2 allows you to do 2 things, or at least to check 2 things. 1, it checks your amount of trigger prep. Okay? When we are doing that long transition, once we're here and ready to let the shot go, we should have our trigger prepped pretty strongly. You should not be in a position where your finger is barely touching the trigger. If you are ready to fire, you should have the slack taken up and some pressure on that so that when it's time to fire the shot, there's not much more motion. And since you're stopping before firing the shot, you can actually check your amount of prep. So there's the first thing. Are you getting a good prep? The second thing, as I said, is when we switch over to the next dot, that short transition, if we're already prepped, the minute we're there and these things are in alignment, we should be able to finish the shot. There should not be much of a pause. So when you're doing this, there is a pause between dots. In other words, I'm here, I snap my head, I drive the gun and take up the slack. I pause there for a second to check that, and then snap, turn, click. Pause between the dots. Check your prep. Then snap that transition, finish the shot without disturbing the sights. Variation 3 is a little different. You can either use the dots on the wall or ignore them completely, take them off the wall, it doesn't matter either way. What we're doing in variation 3 is adding a gun handling aspect to what is effectively a marksmanship drill. Specifically, we're going to add a motion for a reload in here. We're not doing a full reload, you're not dropping anything on the ground, which means you don't have to go pick up anything off the ground. But we are adding some gun handling to what we're doing, because many people find that after a reload, getting their grip on the gun, controlling the gun as it moves out, is not the easiest thing in the world. They are very likely, many people are very likely to screw up their first shot after a reload, just like the first shot after a draw. So, variation 3 helps us work on that. For variation 3, we're pretty much messing up drill 0 fairly significantly. We're still starting with the distance focus there, but instead of having the gun out, we just have it relaxed in here. Empty mag well. Magazine itself is in our weak hand, just touching our hip wherever we would have grabbed it in the first place. We're not trying to start here, we're not doing anything like this. This is just comfortably in, this is comfortably in. So what we're going to do on each rep is we're going to snap our body orientation to the wall that we're doing here. As we do, we're going to bring the gun up, look the magazine into the mag well, retain our grip, or at least fix our grip, extend out, prep, and again take the shot. So the part about getting the gun there, focusing on the front sight and taking the shot has not changed, but we have to do something to get there in the first place. So we start comfortably, snap. Notice I snap my head first. We can do that, depending on what you want to do. For some people, doing this as they're moving works fine because they know where the target is. If, on the other hand, you're not quite sure where the target is, for example, if you're working this with dots, it's occasionally useful to snap your eyes there, then look it into the mag well, prep it, and finish the shot. Now, I'm doing this very slowly. Obviously, we're going to want to work on a faster trigger pull, make sure our eyes are focused on the front sight, etc. All the things that are appropriate for drill 0. Make sure you're relaxed here. Snap, turn, look it into the mag well, grip, extend, then worry about the next part. Now, you can do this a number of different ways. You can do 5 in one direction and 5 in the other direction, doing the freestyle parts. When you do the strong hand or weak hand only, you can do exactly the same thing. We start here relaxed. Look. Okay. As soon as you're done loading, put that fist against the body or somewhere pinned here so it's not hanging there. Extend. Do the trigger pull. If you're doing the weak hand version, finish the reload on the turn, hand the gun to yourself, and work the next part. Something that you have to do fairly frequently in competition is reload and then switch hands, or reload and shoot strong hand only. So for competition skills, those are important. For self-defense, a little less so, but on the other hand, anything that takes your brain away from the mechanics of marksmanship is something that's good to practice, because if you can still do your marksmanship properly, good sight picture, good focus, good trigger control, even if your brain's been doing other things, that's good practice. Now, most of the time when I do variation 3, I don't do it instead of drill 0. Every once in a while I do, because again, the transitioning to a strong hand or switching to a weak hand is a useful thing to do. But most of the time when I do variation 3, I do it after I've done regular drill 0. Say I'm doing drill 0 from this side, starting from a low ready. I do my 10 reps, freestyle, strong hand, and weak hand, and then I do variation 3 from that same position. I might start low, I might start relaxed here, the other hand is here, but I practice doing that. Because again, for many people, right after the draw and right after the reload are the places where we tend to flub our shots the most. Because we've been doing something else, focusing on something else with our brain, and we're not paying attention to what we should. So, whenever you're done doing all the gun handling things, perfect grip, eye on that front sight, get that sight focus, control the trigger. Variation 3 gives you a lot of good practice at that sort of thing. You can do variation 3 instead of drill 0 with freestyle, strong hand, and weak hand. Or you can just work a little bit of freestyle variation 3 for 10 reps after you've done regular drill 0. Either way, it's good practice.